Hello dear friends. You might think, oh, all the cars, he's going to talk about the Tao of Wealth, but why cars? Well, actually, we are going to talk about the Tao of Wealth and what it means and what it could mean and how wealth actually can resolve things and how it can create problems. Let's first talk about the meaning of wealth. There are two main meanings of wealth. The first one is an abundance of valuable possessions or money, and the second one is a plentiful supply of a particular desirable thing. For insofar as I discuss things within the context of our series on economy, of which this also, of course, in a way is, I discussed mostly wealth as part of vanity economy, and this is of course what we're going to investigate in this video, and we are going to do this at Kasteel de Haar in the Netherlands, of which there are some aspects that you might be interested to in regard to the dispensation of wealth. And for this we have to ask ourselves a few questions. Let's first start with inviting you to our retreat in Portugal coming October. In this retreat we're going to discuss aspects of coronavirus, the place where we are in, and what we can do as exercise. But for now we are here in Kasteel de Haar. Castle de Haar predates the founding of the Netherlands almost 300 years. It was built first time in 1391. The family de Haar received the castle and the surrounding lands as a fiefdom from Hendrik van Woerden, one of the landlords in that time. The castle remained the ownership of the Haar family until 1440, when the last male heir died without any children. Yeah, that happens also to the rich. The castle then passed ownership to the Van Zuylen family. After 40 years of ownership, the castle had burned down. The only parts that survived at that time were the non-military parts. In the early 16th century there was a rebuilding of the castle, and all the old parts were incorporated in the new castle. In 1506 the family van Zuylen still remembers that they have the castle because they mention it in their inventory. In the 19th century it is transported from the family Van Zuylen to the Van Zuylen van Nieuwveld. It was renovated by the architect Pierre Cuypers between 1892 and 1912. The castle had 200 rooms and 30 bathrooms. It's incredible. You can see the incredible wealth in this place is ridiculous. The wealth of noble families is called usually old money. But then the Baron van Zuylen of Nieuwveld, who lived between 1860 and 1934, even married Baroness Helene de Rothschild of the Rothschild bankers family. And as a result of that, the family became even more rich, and they became so rich that they could have solved the poverty problems in the Netherlands all by themselves, and in Europe in general. The whole Rothschild family could have solved all the poverty problems in Europe by themselves without any problem, because they owned enough ridiculous possessions. What I understood from the historical references to the family in the castle itself is that the family were basically a sort of rock star family, in the sense that they traveled all over Europe, bought all kind of expensive art, they traveled all over the world, and basically showed off their wealth. In a proper trickle-down economy, of course, they dispensed some of their wealth to the poorer parts of the population and shared their ideas and their wealth and so on a little bit, but not enough to make a significant change in society, because that's what people do in a trickle-down economy. You let something trickle down, but in such a way that it gives people hope, but it doesn't really change anything, because if it would change something you would lose your wealth. So that means that the possession of wealth also indicates the maintenance of wealth. You see this very often in the Bill Gates family, where there is a significant amount of wealth, you can say, and this wealth is used for, in itself, proper uses for the betterment of humanity, but at the same time the family keeps earning lots and lots of money to keep up their welfare that they are doing in Africa and other places. And however good that kind of work is, it doesn't significantly contribute to changes. The amount of money that they have available is more than most countries have as an economy on a yearly basis. At this point, let us go deeper into the concept of wealth. The concept of wealth changed over time significantly. I think it's interesting to understand these changes. The accumulation of wealth is based on the principles of ownership, and the accumulation of resources is in essence wealth. Richness, in that sense, is an abundance of resources when you have it. A wealthy individual, community, or a nation has more accumulated resources than a poor one. And this is where the problem arises, because where does wealth go to? Who does own the benefit? And in general, we can see that the accumulation of wealth is in the hands of a few, or in the hands of a state, or in the time of feudal times within the individual kings. But there is no clear dispersion. In social democracies, you see that the difference between the rich and the poor is a little bit smaller, but in liberal economies you see that the difference between the rich and the poor becomes bigger and bigger, until eventually the poor are destitute, like in the 19th century, and as a result of this destitution, the rich are locking themselves up in bubbles, and gradually you come to the story of H.G. Wells, where eventually the rich live in a heaven-like situation and the poor mutate somewhere in the caves below the reality of daily life for the rich. It sounds silly, but Europe used to be mostly social democratic and has chosen to follow the United States in the sort of a liberal economy. And as a result of that policy, gradually implemented from the 90s, the 1990s of course, we gradually have grown back to a 19th century situation where the importance of the rich is important, and the unimportance of the poor also is important, because gradually it creates difference. And you can say, well, we are wealthy because we are healthy, or because we are happy, or something like this. But material wealth, of course, is very important. I feel very wealthy because I have two lovely kids and a lovely wife, and I practice my taijigongfu, and I practice in my clinic, which is basically what I always wanted to do since I started studying these kind of things. I gradually get better in it, and as a result of this getting better in it, I also create more work for myself, and I share that gladly with people so that also other people can take it as an example, as you see here in the video behind me in front of Kasteel de Haar. Of course, it's a beautiful environment and it's definitely something to do, but taijigongfu is in origin exorcism, and at the moment when you are practicing exorcism you try to get rid of ghosts, and wealth in that sense is a ghost. The wealth people talk about usually is the wealth from the few people who actually really own it, and we are actually, as a result of that, working for it. My situation is a little bit exceptional because I don't really work for anybody. I work for myself, but I also carry a high level of risk. According to the laws of our countries, when you are an entrepreneur, as it is, and I don't feel like an entrepreneur, I feel like a healthcare worker, you are running the risk that if anything goes wrong, that you pay for the damage as a result of it. If it is your fault or not your fault doesn't really matter, and the rich, they don't get to pay in the same way as the poor get to pay. Actually, the brunt of all the problems, like in the previous economic crisis in 2008, is being put on the people who do not have the power to fight back against that issue. It was a banking crisis, but the banks didn't pay for it. They put their money on a savings account and then asked the governments for more money. And as a result of that, the common people had to pay more taxes to compensate for the losses of the government. Adam Smith, as one of the founders of modern economic theory, he saw wealth creation as a combination of materials, labor, land, technology in such a way as to capture a profit. The theories of other people like David Ricardo, John Locke, John Stuart Mill in the 18th century and the 19th century, they built on these views, and we call this now classical economics. Karl Marx wrote a book, Das Kapital of course, which is also about the management of wealth. And all these kind of things are all based on the management of material possessions. But in reality, like in nature, people don't own wealth. Companies can't own wealth. They can't be people. They are in effect all part of what is called humanity, and wealth is being created by all of humanity, so it should also be owned by all of humanity. And I don't want to say that I'm a communist, because I am not. And certainly in America that frightens people if you say something like this. But also in Europe, more and more people, they are worried about the fact that they have to give up their possessions at the moment when a communist or a communal society would come about. But the reality is that everybody creates for wealth in the same way, and if you are the owner of a company or if you are a worker in the company, you actually share the same responsibility for the development and the maintenance of that kind of wealth, so you should also be equally paid. When we look in nature, we see that animals do not collect wealth. They do not store up possessions, and they do not show off by buying Lamborghinis or castles or something like this. No, not at all. Actually, animals, they live a little bit day by day, but at the same time they make a planning, because they do know what actually will happen in every year of their life. And you see that some people with old civilizations like the Aboriginals in Australia, they knew their land and they knew exactly where to go to, which time of the year, and therefore how to make sure that everybody could live in a relative abundance, and as a result of that flourish. So in a way we can say that these kind of people, they lived in a world of equal opportunity. In a way we can say in a just society there is no social mobility, because there's only one level, and that means that everybody more or less shares in the wealth that is being accumulated by all people. In a natural society, that would mean that there would be leadership, like in our current societies, and the people who are not in leadership positions per se, but they are a leader in their qualities of their work, or in their families, or in other situations where one way or the other they are part of the production of the results of work, and that means that everybody would have food, dressing, housing, and peace and happiness. For many people, such an altruistic outlook on the world seems weird, and as a result of that they say, well, Darwinism doesn't allow these kind of thinking, because it is the struggle of the fittest. The fittest will survive everything, and they will basically put down everything that is less strong than themselves, and as a result of that they spread their genes much better. But in our modern technological developments, we are going into new ways of evolution and of development of our humaneness and our humanity. We will develop probably through technology into different kind of species, which is a completely different trajectory, and from generation to generation maybe we will go through big changes as a result of that. Living in the current coronavirus, we can see that maybe some big changes actually are necessary, and it is not only changes which have to do with dealing with the coronavirus itself, but also with the way how we organize our societies. Our societies are at this moment based on the maintenance of inequality, and maybe we should start working on the development of equality. We can keep our monuments as a reminder of how inequality created injustice, and as a result of that create more happiness. There probably is a last thing that needs to be said. Wealth is a complicated thing. There is nobody who has a right for wealth. This is a clear and foregone truth. To speak with Lao Tzu, truth is easy to beget, but it is always far away when you try to look for it. It is just a matter of sharing, proper sharing. The whole thing about the Tao of wealth is that we have to get our priorities straight. Once we have our priorities straight, we do know what we need. We need health, we need tools to manage our health, we need to survive, we need to flourish. But everybody needs to do that on the basis of their talent, their wants, their needs, and the needs of humanity as a whole. And at this moment, our planet is in a state where the sharing of the responsibilities and the profits is more important than ever before. Otherwise, we will get extinct.
Oeh, look at him. Doe ze echt een kung fu master.
Me too.
Yeah.
Maar dat is...
Oh, you're shining also very white. Look at how
Wow.
How many minutes? Maar ik had wel een papa, anders is er niet aan het buigen. Alleen een heel klein beetje.
This is another one. Emily, this is another one. You also do another one then. Yeah.
How long do I stand here?